Welcome to Stunt Stories. I'm Corey Eubanks. Without a doubt, one of the most enjoyable films I got to work on was the Universal Studios picture called Fast Five. This was the first of the Fast and the Furious movies that incorporated the actor Dwayne Johnson, aka The Rock. And it is the only movie that I have worked on every single unit that I worked on every single unit of this feature film and did performing stunts on every single unit and did not receive credit in the stunt department. You know, at the end of the movie, then they roll the credits. My name is nowhere because on the train unit that we shot out there in Parker, Arizona, when it was 130 degrees, 120 in the shade, but 130 degrees, excruciatingly hot. I was actually playing a part, a character, one of the bad guys driving this big, huge truck that would pull up alongside the train so the guys on the back could cut open the train, attach these winches to it, and yank these vehicles, you know, like a Pantera and all these expensive cars, this Corvette, out of the train and onto the flatbed, onto the truck. And because I was playing that part, my name got buried amongst the cast, not amongst the stuntmen, which kind of bummed me out because I did end up winning my third Taurus World Stunt Award on that movie for a stunt that I performed. And to not have my name amongst the stuntmen and stuntwomen was a little bothersome to me. I don't know why, to this day, why that they couldn't have done that. And it was so funny because this character that they wanted me to play, I forget the guy's name in the script, but he was supposed to speak Portuguese. And I don't speak Portuguese. And it was Justin Lin who came up to me and asked, well, you do speak Portuguese, don't you? And I said, no, I don't. He goes, oh, well, I will get you a guy who could work with you and teach you how to speak Portuguese. So they stuck this guy with me that would come up to me once or twice a day to try to teach me to say in Portuguese, hurry, we are running out of time. And I'm going to prove to you what a horrible teacher he was, because it was the words in Portuguese. And this, for those of you who speak Portuguese, going to know that, Corey, that's way off. But it was something like this. Rápido, não dimos muito tempo. Rápido, não dimos muito tempo. Something like that. I know somebody who speaks Portuguese right now is just cracking up going, that was horrible, Corey. You said, get all the chickens inside the fence or something. Not even close to, hurry, we're running out of time. And then the other thing that was crazy about that is to have this vocal coach, dialect coach, whatever you want to call him, teaching me every day how to say that. And then they end up putting a bandana on my face and you can't even see my mouth move. And they end up looping my voice, you know, ADR, additional dialogue recording in post-production, and use somebody else's voice. So it was like superfluous for me to even learn how to speak Portuguese really, really bad. But it was, this movie had multiple units going. There was the train unit with Gary Himes as the stunt coordinator. We were out there in Parker, Arizona. And they had another unit that was shooting in Puerto Rico that I eventually went down and worked for Spiro Rosados in Puerto Rico and for Mike Gunther, and did a cannon roll down there and crashed a few cars and did a nice car chase, had some fun in Puerto Rico. That was a lot of fun down there. And then working on another of the first unit when was in Atlanta, Georgia. But And what's the beauty and the about movies also, I think, which is a lot of fun. And when you get to, expose the people who don't know how pieces are shot in different states but yet when they're edited together, you believe that it's all one piece, one continuous piece. I'll get into that in just a little bit about a fight scene that I did with Paul Walker. But going back to the train unit in Parker, Arizona, running this huge truck, it was massive. And they built this thing from the ground up to have this flatbed on the back that would tilt. And so you could lower the cars off the back. And when you're sitting up in the cab of this truck, you're about 7 or 8 feet up off the ground. And it was very, very high and had a 24 or 28 inches of suspension. I forget, a lot though. It just, you could drive over almost anything. It was like a Baja truck, or just one of those trophy trucks. Just the suspension would just gobble up all the rocks and ditches and bumps and stuff. And it was really quite impressive. But also it had a tendency to want to flip over because it was top heavy. It was very high. It was challenging to keep that thing from not wanting to get onto its side. But to run up alongside this train and for them to ratchet these vehicles onto the back of my truck, I had to be in a very specific mark. I had to be exactly a certain distance away from the train bed, from the boxcar, and not too far forward, not too far back. So what we ended up doing is we took a fiberglass antenna with one of those springs at the base, and we mounted it to the side of this truck, the side of my door, and we stuck this antenna straight out, and we measured it so there was the exact length that we wanted it to be, so it was just touching the train. We cut it and made a couple adjustments until we got it to the right length, and then on the train, we put a red piece of tape about 2 inches by 2 inches. So I knew when I come across the desert and this train's going by at 45 miles an hour, and I get up onto the side of the train tracks where that gravel is, they're kind of, it's like you're driving on a mound. It's kind of, because the train tracks are elevated up off the surface of the desert. And you get up alongside the train, as long as I knew the tip of my antenna that's sticking straight out from my door, it was maybe three and a half. I think it was 3.5 feet long. As long as it was touching that red piece of tape, I knew I was the right distance away from the train I was running, parallel to. And I knew that I was not too far ahead. I was not too far back. I was right on the money. So my whole time driving, I would be focused on that antenna and the red tape. And we did this for numerous days. It was a lot of coverage to get this action sequence shot, yanking those cars off onto the bed of the truck I was driving, and it was a lot of fun, but it was pretty challenging in the heat. Like I said, it was 130 degrees every day for 5 weeks. Well, one night in the middle of the night, I'm assuming, unbeknownst to us, the set decorators went and installed this massive pole alongside the tracks. And this actually, played in the movie as a piece, a story piece. But nobody told us that they had installed this pole. And right in my path, right where I'm going to be driving at 45 miles per hour, not looking straight ahead, not looking where I'm going, I'm staring at my antenna touching the red tape off to my left. And it was, I think, the only time that we didn't go pre-scout the run that we were making, because we'd been doing it for so many days and everything was so consistent. Nothing had changed. We were just picking up from where we left off the day before. And we take off, get up to speed. They call, they roll cameras and they call action. And I come flying across the desert and touch the end of my antenna to that red piece of tape and lined up perfectly. And the guys jump off my truck onto the train to start pulling off hooking up the vehicle that we're going to ratchet back onto the bed of my truck. And I don't know, instinctively, I just glanced ahead for a second and saw that pole up ahead. And it was maybe 50, 75 yards ahead of me. and had to do a double take. Like, wait a minute, that wasn't there yesterday. And then I checked my side mirror to make sure everyone was nobody was straddling my truck bed and the train boxcar. Because if I just all of a sudden make a sharp right-hand turn to separate away from the train so I don't crash into the pole, I might dump somebody alongside the train or, tumble underneath the train wheels. And so I had to make a quick look to make sure everyone was good. I yelled something along the lines of, hang on, or everyone hang on. That's what it was. Everyone hang on. And I then cranked the wheel and just missed that pole that my antenna just tapped it. Because I remember my antenna was wiggling back and forth very violently. So that was dodging a bullet, if you ask me. That was one of those things that could have been disastrous for everybody on my truck. Another thing that they did to that truck that was very impressive is they built a pod on the rooftop so that the actors, myself being one of them, could drive, inside the cab, because I had to do a fight with Paul Walker. And while I would be doing the fight with Paul Walker, Sean Graham would be up on the rooftop in this pod, and he would actually have full control of the gas, the brake, the steering, so we could go across the desert, and Paul Walker and I could do this fight. And I test drove this thing. I think Sean was doing another shot, and I went and test drove it. And it felt like you were in the crow's nest on a ship, because already, like I said, the cab of this vehicle was like 7 or 8 foot high. And then another 4 feet on top of that is this pod. And you're way up there with, 28 inches of travel in the suspension. And when you go off an embankment, you would swear this thing is going to tip over, because you're swaying from one side to the other and back and forth. And I'm like, oh my God, it was so intimidating. And you just had to convince yourself, keep saying, nope, it's not going to tip over. I'm just up in the crow's nest on a ship on a very, stormy ocean that's got a lot of waves to it. It's kind of how it felt. But they did a really impressive job with that pod. And when we shot that part with starting the fight, this is what I was talking about. What's fun about filmmaking, when editorially, when they cut pieces together that are from all over the country, or all over the world for that matter. The fight that we started out there in Parker, Arizona, was with Oakley Lehman doubling Paul Walker. He was Paul Walker's stunt double. Well, actually, they grew up together and they were like best friends. And Oakley Lehman was Paul Walker's stunt double on every movie that he did. And he was doubling him, obviously, on Fast Five, and had to climb in from the rooftop to come into the cab with me so we could start doing this fight, as Sean Graham was driving from up above, weaving through the desert and going over bumps, and we're throwing our punches and try to make it look like we're really fighting. So we do that in Parker, Arizona. And then several weeks later, I fly out to Atlanta, Georgia, where they have this gimbal. They have this device that they've taken the body and the cab of the truck, everything except the suspension, and they put it on this big, huge steel platform that had these huge hydraulic rams coming off all 4 corners. Now, off to the side, there's a special effects man that could have his hand on this steel plate that was a sensor, and it was suspended by springs. And as he pushed down on that steel plate, if he would roll his hand one direction, that whole system that was holding the truck that I drove, that whole gimbal would start to dip and bend that way. If he rolled it back the other way, it would just, every movement he did with his hand, if he rocked the steel plate backwards, pushing his palm down and his fingers coming up towards the sky, the thing would start to do a wheelie. He could make it do a nose wheelie. He could make it as violent as he wanted to make it. It was really impressive, but also a little intimidating because it would really, it's like rattle your cage. You're inside this thing, and he could do it very violently, and you'd just be getting shook back and forth and backwards. And so I'm in this, and Paul Walker and I are rehearsing this fight where I have to take this cutting torch, and they're going to put a flame in post-production. They're going to CGI this flame that I'm trying to burn him with. And in the course of the fight, I'm lunging at him with this cutting torch, and I'm trying to burn his face, and he's blocking it, and he's punching me, and I'm punching him. Well, I went to throw this punch, and just to go over his head, and then he's supposed to counter with this straight right. And right when I made my move, I felt this really violent thrust from the special effectsman, on the gimbal, just throwing me forward, rocking me back, and then snapping me forward again, right when Paul was throwing his right cross. And as you probably already know, in the movie business, in the picture business, when you're doing stunt fights, you're not hitting each other. You're making it look like from the angle you're punching each other in the face. Well, Paul punched me in the face because I kind of got thrown into the direction of where he was already committed to throwing his right cross. So technically, I would say it was more my fault than his, but he smashed me right in the nose, and I was wearing these goggles, and the goggles cut my nose, and I started to bleed, and Paul was like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry. Are you okay? Are you okay?" So they stopped. They stopped, and they cut, and Justin Lin comes running over and climbs up into the truck to see what's going on, and he sees this, this blood coming from my nose, and he goes, "What happened? What happened, Corey? Are you okay?" I go, "Yeah, I'm okay. It's just called karma." And he kind of looks at me like, "What?" And I go, "Oh, well, the other day I was telling all the stunt guys what a horrible actor Paul is, so I kind of deserved this." And Paul looked at me and just started cracking up, and Justin Lin was laughing. It was a very funny moment, kind of just to ease the situation. And then the medic came in and kind of dabbed my nose to get all the blood off of it, and makeup came and put some makeup on the top of it so you couldn't see where I got cut. And we continued shooting the rest of the scene. But that was a very funny memory. There was also a scene where the truck that I'm driving has these people on the back, and as we're racing across the desert to catch up to the train, and they wanted to do this big jump. Well, the Bureau of Land Management did not want us filming in this area for some reason. They were very strict on us. If I drove this truck across the desert, let's say I drove 3/4 of a mile during this chase sequence, I would have to back up over my own tracks so that I didn't create new tracks in the desert. But mind you, as I looked down on both sides of the truck that I was driving, there were already multiple tracks from sand rails and dune buggies and Jeeps and four-wheel drive trucks and motorcycles. And I'm like, it really made no sense to me why the general public can go out there and just tear it up and drive wherever they want to go. But yet, because we're in a movie business, I have to back up over my own tracks. And they would calculate and keep track of how much real estate I actually drove over, because they were going to charge the production company if we exceeded the whatever it was, 10,000 square feet a day. So that was very odd that they would do that to us. But there was this one canyon that had this like a little cliff, like a 12-foot drop off down into this wide creek bed that was just sand. And I remember Gary Himes wanting me to jump that truck off that ledge down into the creek bed. So we actually snuck out there on a day that nobody knew we were going to be there, and threw in these jump ramps, got cameras all set. And I remember going, this is going to be big because I'm already seated 8 feet above the ground and going off this 12-foot drop off. And it looked huge from where I was. And I take off and I had to make a little turn. I remember that I had to make this little turn before I'd line up with the jump ramps. And there was these 2 rocks, these big boulders that were there that just gave me a little bit of clearance on each side. So I had to kind of thread the needle. I don't want to make it sound more, dramatic than what it really was, but it was a little challenging to make sure that I was right in between these 2 rocks and didn't clip one of them before I hit the jump ramp and go off this ledge. And I just threaded between them and jumped through the air. And this thing sailed out there and it landed on its ass end on the rear suspension, and it bucked and threw me right onto my nose. And I was actually doing a nose wheelie in this huge truck. And my first instincts were to just stomp on the brake to stop. And I thought, well, Corey, if you do that, if I stop on the front brakes, it's going to just really flip this thing over. I'm going to, do a front somersault. And so I had to convince myself, nope, don't hit the brakes. And I did this pretty cool, like 20 or 30 yard nose wheelie on this truck before it finally came back down on all fours. There was another scene that we did a few days later that required this Pantera to back off the truck that I was driving and take off across the desert. And the stunt woman who was supposed to be driving it, I believe she was on another unit that day. And anyway, long story short, I had to jump in and drive this for her. And it was, as I said, 130 degrees, and you're in this car with the windows up. It was so frickin' hot. You're just sweating. It was just miserable, like you're sitting in an oven. And I remember Gary Himes, who used to race in the desert. He raced off-road, and he goes, Corey, come here, come out. I got a cool suit for you. And I go, what's that? It was this T-shirt that had these tubes that were, like crisscrossing across the chest and across the back that were, I don't even know how these blue tubes were connected to the T-shirt, but it was pumping cool water through that. And you'd put this T-shirt on and had this ice box next to me with a little electric pump that would pump that water out of the ice box and through these tubes of this cool shirt, and just to cool down your core. And it was so, oh my God, it was so awesome to go from feeling like you're cooking in an oven to having this cool suit on. So then after that, I stopped complaining about how hot it was and just enjoyed racing this Pantera across the desert. Another film that I really enjoyed working on was a movie called Ocean's 11. And I was hired to be George Clooney's stunt double for this scene where they are rappelling down inside this elevator shaft. And they get down to the bottom, and they then cut the cables and drop down to the floor. And they cut the steel cable with a knife. Again, it's Hollywood. It's a movie. They kind of sometimes throw realism right out the window. Like people aren't going to know. Like the audience is stupid, and they're not going to know that you can't take a knife out of your pocket and cut a steel cable. Anyway, maybe some people believe that, but I think you got to give the audience a little bit more credit than that. But that's what they wanted to do. And on this particular day, it happened to be George Clooney's 40th birthday. And I did the scene rappelling down this elevator shaft, myself and a couple other stunt doubles. And now it's the time to do the close-up where George Clooney is going to take this knife and reach up and cut this cable. reach up out of frame, and they'll do a tight insert on the knife, cutting the steel, this magic knife that'll cut the steel cable. And I knew that he had already done this very similar act, in another movie. I think it was called Three Kings, where he actually did something where he was either rappelling, or I remember seeing it in some movie, and he reached up and cut a cable. So he was doing something he had already done before. And for those who've worked with George Clooney, he's a lot of entertainment on the set. He's a great storyteller and likes to, mingle and talk and play basketball with the grips and electricians, and just a great guy. I thought, I always judge people by how they judge me. And I thought, what a great human being, nice man, George Clooney was to me. So on his 40th birthday, he's going to do this. And I'm like, do I say anything? Because I'm there as a stunt double, and sometimes that's your job to try to give your actor some advice so they don't get hurt. So I said, I'm going to say something. And he was already in the harness and hanging from the, and they had a quick release up there that as soon as he reached his hand up out of frame with that rubber knife, the special effects men are going to hit a quick release that will, cut the cable in half, and he'll drop about 3 feet down under these pads that we put beneath him. So it wasn't a big stunt, but it was still, I was concerned that if he's pulling on the cable with his left hand while reaching up with his right, if he's pulling on that cable and they release it, there's a chance he could end up punching himself in the face. So I said, and I waited for him to finish this story that he was telling Steven Soderbergh. And then I said, hey, George, I said, I know you've already done this before, buddy. I know you know what you're doing, but I just got to say it. I go, there's something that's kind of concerning me. He goes, what's that, Corey? What's that? I said, well, if you grab the cable with your left hand, don't pull on it. Don't try to pull, because as you're reaching up with your right to, look like you're cutting the cable, if you're pulling on that cable and then they hit the quick release, I'm just worried you might end up smacking yourself, or it might, something bad could happen. He goes, oh, no, don't worry, Corey. I won't. But hey, Corey, hey, good job, Corey. And I thought, okay, maybe it was unnecessary for me to give him any notes at all, but apparently not, because they roll cameras and they call action, and George grabs the cable about the same level as his face, right in front of his face, grabs the cable and pulls himself toward the cable, pulls himself up, and then reaches up with his right hand to make the motion like he's going to cut the cable. And that's when the special effects men hit the quick release. And sure enough, smack, right in his eye, he punches himself and makes this loud, not a scream, but a very loud, as he falls down into the pads. And he's laying down there holding his eye, moaning and groaning. And I mean, my God, the first AD was on the walkie-talkie, get the medic in here, get the medic right away. And I'm like, I jump down in there and I look and I go, hey, you punched yourself in the face. And he didn't think that was very funny. He was still holding his eye like he was in a lot of pain. And so the medic came over, and well, when that happened and a big star like George Clooney gets injured on set, I mean, it's like a quick draw competition. Everybody goes for their cell phone and starts calling and texting everybody to spread the word that, George Clooney just got hurt on set. Well, those pads that he fell on, we borrowed those from another set around the corner that Tom Cruise was doing this movie with this director named Steven Spielberg. And was it Minority Report? I forget the name of the movie, but anyway, they were a couple stages over, and we had borrowed the pads from them. Well, rumors in Hollywood sure grow and get exaggerated quickly. By the time we broke for lunch and we went to return those fall pads that we had borrowed from the other movie, I got approached by 4 or 5 stunt guys wanting to know, what the hell happened, Corey? What happened? And I go, what do you mean what happened? We heard you punch George Clooney in the face. I go, I punched George in the face? And somebody else heard me say that, but I said it with a question, like, I punched George Clooney in the face? And I was, yeah, Corey punched him in the face. I go, yeah, isn't it his birthday today? I go, yeah, it's his birthday. Hey, Steve, did you hear? Corey punched George Clooney in the face, and it's his birthday. I'm like, no, Corey did not punch George Clooney in the face. He punched himself. He punched himself in the face. I swear to you, guys, I did not punch George Clooney in the face. And so that was the rumor that tail chased me for damn near a year. Any set I would go on, and I'd be sitting there and working with a fellow stuntman or stuntwoman, and sure enough, that question would come up. Hey, Corey, do you mind if I ask you something? I go, no, why? What's up? Is it true that you punched George Clooney in the face on his birthday? I go, no. George punched himself in the face on his birthday. And then I think it was before that happened, or it may have been after. Anyway, I forget. It could have been before. But I was talking to my daughter, Tyler, on my cell phone outside one of the stages. And I saw George come out, and he was going to walk over to his trailer, and he saw me, and I kind of gave him a head nod, and he was walking kind of at an angle approaching me, but he was going to, go off to his trailer, which was off to the right. And I said, hey, Tyler, do you want to say hi to George Clooney? She goes, oh, really, Dad? Can I? I go, yeah, he's right here. Hang on a second. So I go, hey, George, would you mind saying hi to my daughter for me? No, Corey, absolutely. So he walks up, and I hand him my cell phone. And he's standing there, and he goes, because I've told him about my kids. I told him their names, and because we would talk in between takes and stuff, and he knew my daughter's name was Tyler. And so he takes the phone. He goes, hi, Tyler, how are you? And I hear him say, this is George Clooney. I'm an actor, Tyler. Well, did you ever see the TV show ER? No. I'm at work with your dad getting drunk. Here. And he gives me back the phone. My daughter was pulling his legs when he said, hey, Tyler, it's George Clooney. She's like, who? I've never heard of you before. I thought that was very funny. Anyway, listen, I hope you've enjoyed the stunt stories I've shared with you today. And I hope that if you enjoyed hearing my stunt stories, that you will consider subscribing and helping me spread the word to your friends about stunt stories. Thanks, and have a great day.